Hello, you all. Thank you for attending this webinar. It's a great pleasure to have with us for this fifth FAUBAI webinar, three representatives of important international association of universities and university administrators, Hilej van Land, Orla Kinland, and Adel El Zain. Hilej van Land serves the global higher education community as Secretary General of the International Association of Universities, IAU, only global association of the kind. Orla Kinland is the President of the International Education Association of South Africa, IEASA, and Director of the International Office at Rhodes Universities. She leads IEASA's internationalization of the curriculum and internationalization at home efforts. Adel El Zain is Chief Internationalization Officer at the University of Ottawa, Canada, and current President of the Association of International Education Administrators, AIEA, only association dedicated exclusively to senior leaders in the field of international education. Thank you again, Hilej, Orla, and Adele, for accepting FAUBAI's invitation for this fifth FAUBAI webinar. Thanks also to all participants for the webinar. And I would like to invite our President, Maria Leonor Maia, to take the floor. Please, Nona. Microphone.
Hi. Thank you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, boa tarde. Welcome all. I decided to start this session, this webinar, reading a letter addressed to our speakers. Dear Hilej, Orla, and Adele, the idea is to give a little bit of the Brazilian context to them. Dear Hilej, Orla, and Adele, I decided to write you a letter to introduce the dialogue today, June 17, 2020. I'm in Brazil, this huge, beautiful, and diverse country of 200 million people. As any other country in the world, COVID hits our lives. We are bombarded daily by countless losses of life, over 40,000 in Brazil so far, by the fall of the economy and by the loss of jobs, by the worsening of socioeconomic and technological inequalities. Students from vulnerable groups, for instance, are hit especially hard by the unequal access to appropriate technology, computers, and internet speed, or even to internet at all. However, what we observe is that even though the pandemic hits the globe, the political, socio-economic, scientific, and technological levels of development in each country will impact in its ability to respond to it. Currently, Brazil also faces a political crisis, an ingredient that makes the whole environment much more turbulent. If we look into the higher education sector, in which all of us are involved, the situation in Brazil is as follows. The sector has more than 2,000 institutions, 88% of them are private. We have over 8 million students, 75% of them are enrolled in the private sector, which quickly moved to online activities. The other 25 are enrolled in the public sector. Most of the public universities, which represents 12% of the Brazilian higher education institutions, are research-led universities, which belongs mainly to the federal and state higher education system. These institutions are gradually adapting to online activities. Oops, I'm sorry. Oh, it just disappeared, the letter. Hold on, please. Oh my goodness. The ones from the federal system are systematically under attack in their autonomy and financed by the national government. At the same time, it is unquestionable the central role that universities have played in the debate and in the search for solutions to overcome these crises in the country. Believe me, we have seen countless students, faculties, and researchers involved in actions to combat COVID and in support those who suffer from the consequences of the pandemic. From the point of view of the internationalization of higher education institutions, we can say that the impacts may vary a lot, but it will be worst in the institution which channel the internationalization process, mainly in physical mobility, as they tend to suffer strong impacts in the short and medium term. It also will impact how many higher education institutions, especially in the North, approaches the higher education institutions in the South, which are seen mainly as places for recruiting students. In fact, what COVID invites us is to think about how to rebuild the relationship among higher education institutions in the globe, and what is the path open for a more centered horizontal collaboration approach. In sum, how can we drive the new normal in the internationalization of higher education as we are agents of change? There are opportunities in springing up from this environment, and this is the spirit of this dialogue today. All the best. Forte abraço, Nona. P.S. Besides moving to Renee again, who will mediate our meeting, I'd like to pinpoint the FAUBAI's recent activities concerning this matter. So we are running the webinar series. We call it Virtual Wednesday. Today is our 5th one. We start on May 20, beginning with this, especially with the virtual exchange, and we'll develop with other issues. We also provided our members with the Tomorrow Project initiative that gathers brief statements from more than 30 experts around the world about the current and future context of higher education internationalization. Thank you again, huge, Ola and Adele, for accepting FAUBAI invitation to this initiative. We also have the repository of initiatives adopted by higher education institutions during the COVID. And finally, we are trying to participate in the networks of institutions to discuss the problem and solution globally. Next week, we invite all of the attendees of this seminar to be with FAUBAI in the meeting with Latin American Internationalization Network, which will be announced later. Please, Renee, could you follow moderating our meeting? Thank you all.
Thank you, Nona, for this very special message and this letter. Thank you again. And now I would like to give the floor to Hillage van Land to start the 5th FAUBAI webinar on dialogue with the International Education Association. Please, Hillage, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very, very honored and pleased to have been invited to this webinar today, together with esteemed colleagues from 2 other associations, one from North America and internationally, and the other one from South Africa, and one more specifically so from Brazil itself. I must say that the pandemic that has hit all of us recently has also taken away from us the opportunity to come to your beautiful country and be at the FAUBAI conference, which would have been marvelous and unfortunately is not possible. So organizing this virtual space for us to meet is at least a little opportunity to exchange and to learn about what is happening around the world. So I thank you for that. At the same time, I thank Nona for reading out this letter, also stressing the very important challenges that the country is facing. We had another webinar this afternoon that we co-hosted, IAU and CHIA, on the future of value-based higher education. And we focused in particular on the importance of academic freedom for universities to be able to respond to the challenges that we face for the future. And it seems that Brazil is facing particularly important challenges when it comes to trying to foster and keep up the good values upon which to build higher education in the future, especially in the political context that you just described. The speaker from Brazil came from Unicamp. He's the rector, you all know him, and he was very vocal about it, also stressing the need for international cooperation to help assist in finding solutions for the future. So when we discussed preparations for this particular webinar, we were invited to look at challenges and perspectives for collaboration for higher education institutions in the South, more specifically, with a little PS at the end that asked to look at what it would be in the new normal. I hope that for you, this is not the new normal. What Brazil is renowned for is its enormous internationalization efforts, very positively so, and for all its programs, and not the least for the huge program Science Without Borders. You indicated that the South is too often still a continent where students are being looked for in order to come study elsewhere. And it would be very good if this pandemic now would offer an opportunity for a reverse mobility or a reverse dynamics even of cooperation, be it virtual or being it face-to-face. Because your beautiful program showed how vital and how vibrant the science community in Brazil is and the many opportunities there are for working together, hoping that the current political situation in the country will not destroy it all. So today the situation is very challenging. And so the political situation is one, and obviously the COVID-19 pandemic is another one. We need to rethink the country in context. We need to rethink the countries with an S in context. And we really certainly hope that this is not a new normal. All the countries around the world have shown that universities have good structures that need to be probably improved also for the current situation and into the future. But there are wonderful opportunities for the universities to be part of the solutions for the challenges that we face. In particular, I would say that the Brazilian system, as just described, is a very rich system and very diverse, with public and private institutions, with small, with bigger one, and with an incredible, beautiful opportunity to leverage on the diversity of the country itself in terms of populations, in terms of social and economic and cultural backgrounds. And I hope that instead of destroying it, and I will use that term again, there will be an opportunity to rebuild it. There are only a few certainties upon which we can discuss the future that would be a future of our cooperation for the future. The certainty is that we cannot predict the future, and we hope that certain things that are in the way for a better future can be addressed, and that there will be an opportunity through the pandemic as well to look critically at how we want to develop the kind of society in which we want to live. We hope that democracy will stand up to anti-democratic values that are coming up too often in too many countries, not only in Latin America, but elsewhere as well, and not the least in Europe. The impact of the pandemic itself is unprecedented and global, and we're learning daily about how it acts and how we are to react to it. There are several futures that are coming up, several different futures. And the starting point is absolutely not the same in every country and in every institution. The impact is neither the same in one country, even, not even in your country between North and South, and it is the same in other countries as well. So the challenges come with an impossibility to really share at the same level everywhere, but still we can learn from each other, and we have to learn from each other, because opportunities and solutions found in one part of the world, if they're not applicable as is, can be adapted and everybody can learn from it. So these kinds of dialogues are essential. There are many changes that will happen in terms of internationalization, and even that will be different in different parts of the world. One aspect that I would like to highlight right from the start, because it's also the red line in my presentation, is that we will certainly need to look at Latin America, that is today in such dire straits, to make sure that we foster the kind of international cooperation that is required to help any system within a society to rebuild. So we will certainly not go back to business as usual. We also will not have a new normal, because what is normal? Actually, that is something that we can question. Maybe that it was not normal because there was a lot of inequality. There was a lot of ecologically unsustainability. The business models were not viable. And so we need to use the opportunities of the total disruption that we face today to rethink what we do in a different way. So about possible futures, we need to look at international opportunities as well and how we can learn from each other, because international education is about exploring and understanding and valuing other perspectives, learning languages, gaining cultural know-how. Intercultural sensitivity and understanding is a way as well to avoid conflict and to avoid also detrimental competition between different parts of the world. It certainly is also the best way to better understand how we can work better together instead of ignoring parts of the world that we should, on the contrary, work with on equal footing. So international cooperation, capacity building in higher education comes with the need to look at how to foster solidarity between nations, because that is what internationalization actually is about. It is not about students bringing in money to support a system. It is about really bringing people together to connect knowledge systems, to get out of one's comfort zone, to enter into new realities, and to actually foster innovation. So in the future, we have an opportunity to process to a rebalancing act. And so instead of continuing to compete for market share or to compete for numbers of students to make sure that we get the best in one part of the world instead of having them everywhere, we need to look at different modes of fostering research cooperation to overcome gaps, because we will all be better off if we're all better off economically, socially, culturally, because it will allow for the beauty of the world to be offered and understood in a better way. I'm not naive. I understand that there are many parts that are driven by political agendas, by economic concerns, by greed, by many. But still, higher education is the sector best equipped to actually address all these challenges and make sure we overcome those. The important aspect of internationalization there as well is the opportunity to connect the different disciplines within institutions. And we need all the disciplines on board. I know that in Brazil as well, the social sciences and humanities are being challenged very much these days. And these, on the contrary, are the bedrocks upon which to build better societies. Because if we understand where we come from and what we do and how we actually look at the future, if we look critically at what we do, obviously that is maybe a part that certain politicians dislike most, but that is what we need to actually better understand and learn from errors in the past and move into a better future. So we have an opportunity here. Strategies for internationalization in higher education will need to be rethought. They will need to meet the demands of society in a different way. We face so many challenges, and Agenda 2030, with the identification of 17 specific sustainable development goals, is one roadmap that we could all use, especially as well when talking internationalization of the studies and internationalization of the curriculum, and even the internationalization of research, because we need to address the tripartite challenges that we face: economic, social, and political. So advocacy for international cooperation needs to be stronger than ever. We need for curriculum change where it will be embedded. We need for continued faculty and staff training. We need for continued academic mobility. We cannot just base our future on virtuality, even though it is a nice way to keep our connection going. But we will need to face a strong push for more, more local, less open, more nationally focused future in too many parts of the world, and on the contrary, foster the importance of opening up. And I believe that the three organizations that you've brought together do believe in the same kind of spirit. So the pandemic and the situation today has shone new light on the differences between political and economic regimes, between democracy or authoritarianism on the other hand, between welfare states or hyper-capitalistic ones. And they have shown the limits of economic and political globalization maybe, but they've also shown the need for a good concerted internationalization strategies at all levels of the society. I will finish in a minute, but I would like to still stress two important aspects. The crisis has exposed some of the darkest sides of our interconnectivity and of cooperation, and networking around the world now needs to be redirected in pursuit of a new kind of internationalization, one that will really look at the challenges and will try to develop the kind of solutions we need for today and for tomorrow together. So in a nutshell, what has the IAU been doing? We have organized similarly the kind of dialogues online that you're fostering here. We also have made sure that we connected the non-connected from around the world, and always from the different parts of the world, so that the voice doesn't come from one side, but from all sides, always together, because it's only in that complementarity that we can build the kind of world that we need. I also would like to say that it is through the cooperation that comes online that we can look at how the current situation is an opportunity for increased South-South cooperation and for increased South-North cooperation. The North has to learn still a whole lot. So we need to co-create something new, and this is the nice opportunity that we have. At the IAU, we've developed two global platforms for that: a global meeting of associations in a virtual manner, where we bring all the associations, were it national, geographical, topical, any. We bring them to the virtual table to debate on the challenges we all face, on the opportunities that they are, and how we can better communicate what are the opportunities for the future. And as well, and that is what what the FAUBAI knows well as well, is this dynamics of IEASA, and all the partners here at the table are part of this network of international associations for education. And together, you have been developing, because I've looked at it from afar, did only from here and there look at the text. But you are about to adopt a statement on the future of internationalization. And I think that that, for instance, is one of the beautiful opportunities today. We look critically at what is, and we look critically at what can be. Thank you for now.
Thank you, Hillage. Thank you, Hillage, for presenting us a positive, because it's important to look at the future in a positive way as well, especially in this moment. And Celso, is it possible to come back to the orientation, because I've forgotten to, if it's possible? That's it, that's it. Please, if you want to present questions, you can submit questions to the Q&A area in English, please. In English, please. And questions will be selected. I have some noise. Well, at the end of all presentations. And the slides and the recording of this webinar will be available on the FAUBAI website. Please, I would like to invite Adele to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you, FAUBAI, for inviting AIEA to this panel. And allow me, please, to say how happy I am to be with the prestigious sister association, the International Association of University, the International Education Association of South Africa, and FAUBAI, for sure. As our colleague Hilge said, we share values and we share aspiration for internationalization of higher education and for the world. I'm glad also that this panel is conceived as a dialogue among associations and about international collaboration. I think we need more of these dialogues, and we need to learn from each other as we learned from our colleagues. So we are invited to talk indeed about the challenges and perspectives of our opportunities for collaboration for higher education institutions in the South and in the new normal situation. I think we need to be very precise in what we are trying to do here, because I would like maybe to invite us to think the rise of a new area we don't know yet, the rise of a new unknown and still to be discovered area of internationalization. We have been talking about a new normal since probably January, and for us as an institution since March, and not only in higher education, in different domains, in travel, new normal, in politics, new normal, in economy, new normal. But what is this a new normal? And I think I would like to invite us, all of us, to really question this idea of a new normal and ask ourselves, actually, did we have already a normal? Do we have one business model? We would say this is the normal, this is how we do internationalization, and now we are going to change. I would say no, we don't have a normal way of doing internationalization. We have different ways of internationalization. I think we developed ways of living, we developed models of internationalization of higher education. We don't even have one single universal definition of internationalization. We have a lot of definitions, and we have even sometimes contradiction. We have confusion. Oftentimes we talk about internationalization, but actually we talk about internationalization and we don't say internationalization of what. And we talk about internationalization and we work on international education, on education or study abroad. So I think we need indeed not only to think the future, but to think also the past, the before area, just to understand what we have done so far. For now, and it's the new model, the new normal, when we talk about the new normal, oftentimes we copy what we have now and we say this is going to be the new normal. And this is very, very dangerous, very risky. Currently, we live in what I call urgent transition. We are transitioning to something new. We don't know yet. And this is why I think it's important to mention that even the new model or a new normal is not new. We have been thinking of it for years, and probably the public health crisis, the COVID-19, is just acting as an accelerator now for this transition. So let me go with you. I personally prefer to think in terms of triad, three norms. So past, present, future, yesterday, today, tomorrow, before, now, and after. So let's go to the next slide, please, Celso. And let's have just a quick look at the past. Actually, the past, who's talking, and depending what you ask, who you ask about internationalization, several researchers, a lot of researchers compare internationalization to this area of colonization or the brain drain. You know the literature. Internationalization, we are colonizing, we are recruiting, we are making, you know, the brain drain from the south to the north, oftentimes, or from less developed countries to more developed countries. I think the last maybe 10 years, we did what I call over-partnering. All of us, we have a lot of partnerships. We knew that. So we over-partnered, probably in the world. I think also we did the over-commercialization, over-mercantilization, or commodification of international education. We traveled a lot, which means we paid a lot of money. Also, we polluted the planet. But also we made what I would call over-definition, or maybe I should say lack of definitions, lack of clarity in the definitions of our work, of what we do. I mean, if the customs ask you at the airport, what do you do? What is your job? Probably you will say, professor, I work as administrator. And when we come to ask to explain the internationalization of higher education, we need like 30 minutes to explain it. I think we have also a confusion. I mean, I see you are laughing or smiling, but honestly, we have a difficulty. I mean, I have a difficulty to explain to my family what is my work, right? Okay. So we have also confusion, as I said at the beginning. We title our work Internationalization of Higher Education, but we talk only about study abroad. Very, very, very few work talk about internationalization of research, internationalization of the community engagement or social engagement of the university. So we created a lot of negative impacts on the leadership, on the place and the management and the governance of internationalization of higher education in our own institutions. But the old model has also a lot of positive impacts, a lot of positive things, a lot of achievements, because we indeed increased the number of international students all around the world. By the way, we generated also more revenue. And this is why in some countries, the international education is part or is a branch of international trade. It's not in higher education, it's international trade. We have also created not only brain drain, but the brain mobility in the brain circulation. It's south-south, south, north-south, etc. So we need to recognize that. We have also a lot of international research collaboration. Today, we need to confess and to recognize that international research collaboration is easier than, let's say, 20 or 25 years ago. We did a lot of international mobility. We moved a lot of students, but also faculty, administrators, staff, and we created, I think now, a framework or frameworks of global competencies, and we have a global awareness. I think the young generation showed us the last years how concerned and how aware they are about global competencies and about the future of the planet. Next slide, please, Celso. So is this the next? Yeah. So the past, I think I'm not making here a complete and full review of the past or of our achievements so far, but I think it's important to recognize that we have a lot of achievements here. We have also, I think today, in this crisis situation for months now, we work in what I would say urgent and tinkered internationalization. We are making bricolage, okay, patchwork of internationalization. We are tinkering internationalization because we don't have a model for internationalization in crisis situation. We don't do that usually. We are living in crisis situation. We are concerned more by crisis management issues. We moved to distance learning, to working from home, to virtual collaboration, but we are still concerned by safety and security of our students, of our staff, of our campuses, of our community. So we don't travel. We have problems on visas, on control, etc. And in the same time, when we moved online or on distance learning approach, distance learning, teaching and learning, we recreated or we brought back the digital divide. We have to be aware about the digital divide. We should never assume that even the 75% of your students in Brazil, they have full access to internet or to technology. Even here in Canada and in developed countries, we still have some desert areas where internet is not available and people don't have really very good access to the technology. On the other side, actually, on the positive side, we proved that as institutions, we are agile, we are flexible, we can teach online. We have been advocating for 25 years now about distance learning and distance teaching, and we did it in a few weeks. All our content is online now. So we proved we are agile, we are flexible, we are innovators, we are collaborators. We proved all that. We adapted. Question, for how long we will adapt and we will continue to work in this virtual mode? I think all of us, we know that it's not something we can sustain for long term. But also we faced, are lucky because a lot of government funded urgently some research, especially in medical area, the area of virology and the crisis management, all areas related to public health. So this is, I think, the present, what I call this urgent transition to something else. The something else, I would say, is what I call the new model, and not the new normal. I think we should, no, can you go back to the previous one? Yes, thank you. So I think we are still looking now for models in plural with S of internationalization of higher education, because we don't have one single model that will apply everything. And I am really not comfortable with all this metaphor of a new normal. It's not a new normal, it's new, maybe we will discover new models. I am not comfortable at all with all this metaphor we are using of pause, reboot, rethinking, reinvent. We need to develop, to think about what to evaluate, to assess our achievements so far, and to work toward something new or something adapted to our needs now, something more intentional, more purposeful, intentional and purposeful internationalization of higher education. So this is, I think, my reflection on the new normal and new models we need now. So please, let's think, not a new normal. We need to develop probably a set or a series of new models appropriate for our needs. Let me go to the next one, please, Celso, and to think together the opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities. We have an opportunity to learn and to rethink our work. We have, I think, the opportunity now to ask ourselves and our partners, our leadership, our students, our providers, to ask them the why we want to internationalize higher education. And we need, I think, to develop our theory of change. The theory of change is what we want to change through internationalization of higher education. What are the method, the approaches, and the objectives we will achieve? I am a linguist by training. I'm very conscious about the words and the meaning of the words. Objectives are not means. So, and you will see, I will discuss this a little bit later. So I think the opportunities I see now with this crisis, in the horizon, I will frame them as more institutional cooperation. We need institutions, universities, colleges to work together. We have been working like oftentimes either on individual basis, this teacher like this other teacher. This teacher is graduated from this university and he wants to develop a joint degree with his alma mater. He is Lebanese, he wants to work with Lebanon. He is British, he wants to work with Great Britain. No, we need to see institution to institution, how we can work together. Or the other side, we also been pushed by government. The government strategy wants me to work with Saudi Arabia or want me to work with China or with Brazil. Why? Okay, so this is very important for us, more institutional cooperation. We need to find the objective-driven internationalization of higher education. I appreciated IAU, you said the value-driven cooperation, absolutely, absolutely, but also the objective-driven cooperation. I mean, in MOU, oftentimes we sign MOU, memorandum of understanding. To do what exactly? Are we serious about faculty exchange? If not, why we sign the MOU? Are we serious about knowledge exchange? This 5 or 6 lines we put in the MOUs. So we need to have objectives. We need to distinguish between the objective and the mean. We should ask ourselves, for example, international education, international mobility. I want to send the students abroad. A government of a country, they want to develop their citizen mobility abroad. Why? And I'm not questioning, I'm not saying no, but I think we need to be clear about the why, about the objective. For example, is international mobility an objective per se, or is it a mean to develop the student international experience or the student academic experience? It's different. Or the student professional skills. So really, if you are specific and clear about the objectives, we can develop better tools for that. And so institutional cooperation, objective-driven, we need to strengthen the professional expertise of our staff. We need experts in internationalization, and not people who are doing internationalization because they are former ambassador or former diplomat of their country. And now they are doing internationalization. We need experts in internationalization. We need the programs. We need PhD in internationalization of higher education. We need masters in internationalization of higher education. And I think the role of our associations here is key. The role of the AIEA, FAUBAI, IAU, and all the other institutions in building this professional skills and the professional expertise. And I think we need to prove how internationalization contribute to the institutional and social objectives. For me, internationalization is not an objective per se. Internationalization of higher education serves something else. And just to make some progress, we need also to leverage resources. I think we proved that internationalization can be costly. We need now to see how we can develop more collaboration among institutions, associations, countries to work together to share resources, and not only because we are having now an economic impact of the public health crisis, but because it makes sense. It makes sense to share educational resources in open manner, for example, to develop virtual laboratories and access to research facilities. Next, please. So we have challenges. And our challenges in terms of internationalization of higher education is really for all of us as professionals, as administrators and associations, to make internationalization of higher education work for students, faculty, researchers, community, and partners, for the society in general. You heard me saying internationalization of higher education, because I think I said that before, internationalization or to internationalize is transitive verb. It takes something. I cannot say I am internationalizer. I must be internationalization of something. When I say internationalization of higher education, I'm implicitly saying internationalization of research, internationalization of teaching and learning, internationalization of community engagement. So we need to be clear about the purpose and the intention of comprehensive internationalization, and to be clear what are we to internationalize. Ask the why, but also ask the so what question. What if I don't know it? So what? I will send my students abroad. So what? Why? I mean, they can go abroad in tourism. If they are going to study, I need to make sure that I'm clear why they are going and what they want to study abroad. Next slide, I think, is the conclusion, if I'm not wrong. Yes. I will conclude by some question, actually. I'm asking myself, and I would like to ask all of us, if we are now reaching what I call the end of the mercantile internationalization of higher education and the rise of a purposeful and intentional internationalization of higher education. When we can state the why, we can say why we are doing what we are doing, what is our theory of change. I'm also asking ourselves if we are going to be at the defensive side and to be spending a lot of efforts in the defense of internationalization of higher education, despite the backlash of trade globalization. Trade globalization is indeed facing huge problems now. And I'm not sure that, for example, France can build a lot of economy on, doing or how say fabric masks, for example, or the personal protection equipment. It's not an industry. We agree on that, I think. But there is a backlash of the trade globalization, and I'm wondering to what extent we will be on the defense now. I think we need also to build the future of internationalization of higher education instead of following and repeating what uninformed politicians and journalists repeat. We have a huge problem with the media and with policymakers. They don't really understand what they talk about. We need to inform them. We need to influence them, and not only to follow them. And this is not in the South. It's everywhere in the world. It's probably more in the North than in the South. We need to work more with politicians, with media, and educate them and inform them. And I will finish, I think, Edgar she will probably agree with me. You said that, I think, there is no new normal. There is a need for new models. We need to be more proactive. We need to build new models. We need to build new approaches for the internationalization of higher education. We need to build, I think, probably new models for higher education as a whole, not only for the internationalization of higher education. The higher education system as a whole need to be, I would say, higher education systems, because we have several systems, need to be rethought, and we need to question our role in how we contribute to the future of the society globally, but locally too. Thank you.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you, Adele, for showing us how important it is to learn from the past to build the future, and showing us as well opportunities and issues. I would like to invite Orla to, please, Orla, the floor is yours. You have to put your microphone on, please.
Okay, is that working? Okay, great. Okay, first of all, I'd just like to thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. And thank you to my colleagues for sharing their insights and reflections on the current situation and where we might be going in the future. I'd like to also thank Nona for the opening letter. And just to say that I'm representing the International Education Association of South Africa, And I think that while South Africa is smaller than Brazil, we share a lot of very common issues around our socioeconomic situation, inequality in both our countries, the politics of the country. At the moment, we've had a quite a scientific-based, scientific-led response to COVID, but the sustainability of that early approach of, social isolation and lockdown was very much ultimately challenged by the socioeconomic conditions of most of the people. There wasn't sufficient social security and safety net to allow for people to remain in those conditions, because like Brazil, there are people who, if they don't go out and work in the informal sector, they have no food. And so even, responding with best public health practice to a situation like COVID-19 becomes extremely challenging in countries where there is such enormous poverty and inequality. Our higher education system is a lot smaller in Brazil. We literally have 26 public higher education institutions. Within those systems, within that system, there are three types. There's comprehensive universities, universities of technology, and then largely research-based universities, the more traditional universities in South Africa. We have had a legacy from the apartheid years that still remains with us. There is still great inequality across the institutions. And then within the actual student population, there remains great inequality. And many of you will know we had a very active student movement, Fees Must Fall, in start of 2015, 2016. It did result in some facilities being made available for students below a certain income threshold, which has allowed greater access. But the institutions themselves, particularly those relying on fee-paying students, have been severely challenged. So for our system, COVID has created some temporary emergency management requirements, but we are still suffering and recouping and adjusting to the impact of the Fees Must Fall and the lack of resourcing in the universities. And I think as we look at this whole topic of the opportunities and challenges to partnership, I'd just like to echo Adele's sentiment about what is normal and whose normal are we talking about, because for a lot of South African institutions, and I think that it applies equally to many institutions across the continent of Africa, the kind of normal that worked for perhaps some institutions in the North, in Europe, in the US, never has really worked for the institutions in many of the southern situations, many of the African situations, and even within South Africa, which is probably the best higher education system as a whole within the African continent, and is very much still a hub for postgraduate study from the rest of the continent. And the majority of our international students hail from the continent of Africa, particularly from the SADC region. So even though we have that system, we still have incredible struggles to get students going through that system. We have struggles to do internationalization because of funding issues. So the normal really didn't work for us. And while this is not another exacerbating factor, we are on an onward journey of grappling with how do we make our system sustainable on an ongoing basis. So I'm just going to quickly give a little bit of an overview, just setting that context. It is different to Brazil, but we face the same issues, but clearly on a slightly smaller scale, because we're talking about 26 public institutions. And they are very much public institutions. The majority of the students are in public institutions. And so IEASA then is the organization that represents internationalization within these public institutions. We also have individual members, and you know, I've given you the website link because I feel with the time frame we've got here, I don't want to go in too much to the context and the purpose, but essentially we are the specialist organization in international education in South Africa, and we try to bring everyone who's interested in and involved in internationalization and higher education in South Africa together to, you know, work towards common goals, to share information, to build capacity. We have our flagship programs of a conference, we do a publication, and we do workshops throughout the year. As I was sitting listening to my colleagues, I see the president has just made another announcement and included permission for conferences for work-related purposes to happen in the course of the rest of the year. So that's created quite a lot of flurry on my my WhatsApp messages here at the moment, because up to this, those kind of gatherings they were prohibited. So clearly we're in a very fast-moving situation, which is why anything I say today is literally a snapshot. It could all shift within the next week. So I just thought I would say that, you know, IEASA's response to help our institutions in the situation, we really felt that quite a lot of the debate, you know, obviously there was the closing down of universities and the shift to online with all its challenges, as you outlined at the beginning, as the president of FAUBAI outlined at the beginning. In societies of great inequalities, there's the whole issue of who has access to laptops, who has access to electricity, who has access to data, who is living in conditions where even if they have these provided, you know, if there are 10 people living in a small flat together, can that person really study and do their work? So those would be the challenges of quite a large proportion of students in the South African context. We felt that because there are so many issues around poverty and inequality, that the international students were almost being seen as a peripheral group within the context. And we felt that we needed to be a voice for the international students in the context. So we did do a position paper outlining the plight of some of these students and, you know, some of the repercussions for them of closing universities at very short notice to meet the lockdown requirement. And we felt that we needed to draw attention to this group of students and to ensure that their needs were being taken care of. So we did do a position paper, which I've put the link on the presentation, which I think you all have access to. We also wrote to the minister, drawing attention to international students, and subsequently in the most recent government gazette, a commitment was made by the minister that international students will be supported through remote learning support until they return, and that there will be tailored catch-up plans when they return. Now, of course, each university has to implement that, and it does present challenges because the costs of providing the same materials to an international student who finds themselves outside the South African border versus one inside are vastly different and, you know, pose a challenge to the universities. So IEASA made some commitments and made some calls to action in this current situation, and we committed to ensure the inclusion of international students in considerations for the successful completion of the 2020 academic year, to garner support for higher education internationalization in a post-COVID-19 world. And we committed to being an advocate for higher education internationalization in South Africa. We facilitate a community of practice of university of staff engaged in higher education internationalization. We're doing that through meetings, webinars, WhatsApp groups. We've established a webinar series, like many of my colleagues' associations, to share information, experiences, and good examples with regards to the challenges and how people are mitigating them. So our most recent webinar was the Department of Home Affairs around the situation of students whose visas are running out while they're in lockdown, while they're in the country, or students who will want to return and while they're abroad, they have issues with their visas. So we're getting down to really practical ways of advising students and also negotiating on their behalf with the Department of Home Affairs. We will be hosting an IEASA conference. We intended to do it virtually. We may now revisit that in light of this recent announcement, but essentially we will keep actively going and doing our activities in different ways for the rest of the year. We called on South African universities to ensure the ethical and equitable treatment of international students. We called on them to communicate with their international students in consultation with all the relevant institutional stakeholders. And we called on them to focus on new ways of working, teaching and learning, and advancing internationalization at home and internationalization of curriculum dimensions through the use of technology. We also asked universities to review their institutional policies to mitigate and circumvent challenges unique to short-term and degree-seeking international students. Many of the study abroad students actually returned home and, didn't complete their term. Some of them are completing their work with the university hosting them online, but from their own home places. So again, they're not quite getting the full holistic study abroad experience. And we've also called on universities to adopt their internationalization approach to focus on equity and inclusion. I think again, my colleagues have alluded, and Adele, the idea of internationalization, which ultimately was around international students almost as part of the fundraising, profit-making entity within institutions, versus that value-driven approach to enhancing your research, your teaching and learning, and your community engagement through internationalization. And through internationalization, trying to share and promote equity and inclusion, and almost as a contravening force to some of maybe the national inequities that internationalization will give you an outside perspective, and if people engage in that, it sometimes allows people to look more closely at what's going on in their own societies. We also called on the South African government to facilitate and assist with the reintegration of international students when the lockdown and the various levels are over, and to facilitate the alignment and coordination of efforts to combat COVID-19 where possible by a variety of strategies. I'm very aware of time here. All this is in the IEASA position paper, which I've sent the link through for that. We want to reaffirm the commitment to higher education internationalization by asking the government to adopt the national internationalization policy framework and to support its implementation across the sector. And then finally, we would like facilitation of the alignment and coordination of initiatives affecting international students across government departments, including the Department of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, the Department of Home Affairs, and the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. We had a look at this whole issue of collaboration as it's currently outlined in the South African draft policy. And the advised prioritization of collaboration is as follows. Priority must be given to South Africa's interests, and thereafter, where possible and relevant, the following priority must be adhered to: the interests of the SADC states, then the rest of the African continent, then the global south and emerging economies, and then the world beyond. So this is very aspirational within the policy, and it's the first. This draft policy has got a little bit delayed by, what has happened with COVID. It's been in the pipeline for about 2 years. And there was some controversy around the fact that it's almost putting this geopolitical prioritization on collaboration, because of course, as we all know, knowledge does not have borders. And, even for example, in this COVID crisis, we may see the a vaccination emerging out of any country in the world, and certainly everyone will be interested in working with the people that are coming up with the solutions. So there is a little bit of a tension here in stating that, academic collaboration should be prioritized in a geopolitical prioritization rather than on a knowledge prioritization, which doesn't have borders. And then, of course, the reality is that the majority of funding within Africa for research is coming from Europe and North America, and not actually coming from within the continent itself, its own resources or its own governance. So that's just another thing. I mean, a development that just again, I mentioned about the normal and the new normal. I'm very much with Adele about these kind of catchphrases about the new normal and the old normal, because there was such differentiation, such disparities in the old normal when you go across the globe, and particularly when you look across the African continent. I mean, you will notice that a lot of the international education conferences, there really are very few people coming from Africa, and a lot of that's around practical issues, like they couldn't get their visa on time, or their visa was rejected, or they just couldn't get the funding. And so, there are global inequalities, which, I mean, we did flag this up with the Nelson Mandela Bay Declaration, which NIEA that Helge referred to earlier, wrote, and it was about some of these inequalities in international education itself, and a commitment to try and address that was signed up to by most of the international associations. So just to recap in very summary mode, that the kind of challenges a lot of African academics and African universities face can be summarized in the following bullet points: that international mobility really has always been an issue because of the points I just mentioned. Funding and equipment for research. So you have academics are in labs and they don't have funding for the equipment, and so therefore they teach theoretically and can't show practical application to their students. So sometimes they will have a great theoretical base, but they haven't had any of the practical implementation of lab work, or they mightn't have access to computers. And so you do see that research methodology sometimes gets impacted by this lack of access to facilities earlier on in student life. Switching to blended teaching and learning, which has been one of our, I would say, most prevalent transitions during this period, is again a very mixed bag for a lot of universities, depending on their starting point. So where universities have had digital platforms, they have teachers and students that have been using a certain amount of online technology. It's working fine. For others that really they did not have access to those basic equipment, or they didn't have the platforms in place, there are still many students struggling to access online programs that have already started. Now, in South Africa itself, there's a commitment that everybody will be allowed to catch up in the course of this year, even if it spills over into the next year, that nobody will be left behind. But how they're going to see through that commitment and how they're going to address the resourcing required to ensure that still remains a subject of debate. We're in currently level 3 of lockdown, with level 1 being the most open and level 5 being the most restricted. So right now there is 1/3 of students who are prioritized according to perhaps them being in their final year or needing access to labs. 1/3 of students are being allowed to come back on campus, but that doesn't mean they're being allowed to have face-to-face teaching. It just means they will have staggered, socially distanced access to some resources. But that leaves 2/3 of the students that are not back on campus. And again, for the more impoverished students, not having access to the facilities on campus means they just don't have access to facilities. Wealthier students can manage to get online and can manage to participate in other ways. So that's kind of just some of the challenges we're having, and some of the challenges of collaboration, because if you're on those on that unequal footing, it's very hard to have successful collaboration, because successful collaboration and partnership really requires some kind of reciprocity and mutual respect. And
Orla, please.
Sorry?
Orla. Hello, Orla, please.
Hello?
I just want to, yes, it's Renee speaking.
Sorry.
I just want to tell you that you have, well, we have time to discuss a little more. If you can go a little, yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Okay, I just wanted to draw your attention.
Thank you.
Don't worry, sorry, I'm terrible, I know. Okay, so I just wanted to draw your attention to one example of African collaborative research, which is ARUA. And this is a network of 16 leading African universities throughout the continent who deliberately want to pool their own limited resources together to come up and generate some uniquely African research funded by themselves and with their own collaboration to model what is possible and what could happen. And then, of course, they're hoping to leverage some funding from that. But I've given you their example website. It might be interesting to have a look at that. The other thing I want to draw attention to quickly is the UNESCO Addis Convention on Higher Education. This is, again, a hopeful development on the African continent, because it, again, establishes a framework for the fair and transparent evaluation of higher education qualifications in the African region. Because prior to this, unlike Europe, which had Erasmus Mundus and credit transfer systems, we've not really had that on the African continent. So that is another great development that might hopefully improve mutuality and collaboration on the African continent. And then I just finally wanted to give a quick nod to the BRICS Network University. It's been almost 2 years since that network held a meeting in Stellenbosch in South Africa. And I spoke with one of the main coordinators, Professor Bawa, who's the Chief Executive Officer of University South Africa, earlier today to ask how was that doing. And his assessment is that unless there is some state funding goes into this network, that it's not really going to fly or make headway. And that is a network in which BRICS and South Africa are both, Brazil and South Africa are both participating. So I suppose in conclusion, I'll just say that I don't think the old normal worked for a lot of African institutions, that higher education on the African continent already faces so many challenges in international collaboration that the current situation is just one other layer of complexity, but you know, it is not, it's not the make or break situation. But that within this continent, there is huge innovation and knowledge to be shared, particularly in a lot of the issues facing the rest of the world around the Sustainable Development Goals. There is a lot of innovation, a lot of interesting work in NGOs, and there is a dearth of research about some of the really innovative practice that is on the continent, which could be shared with the rest of the world. So I'll end it there. I'm sorry if I went over my time. I got a little lost in thought there.
Thank you. It was really interesting, but we need to have a little time to dialogue and to discuss. I would like to, can you hear me? I cannot see you.
Yes. Oops.
Yes, we can.
I am back. I would like to invite you and restart with Village. Very short reactions, and I would like to ask you, so what?
So what? That is a nice question. Well, so what? I think 3 points. The first one is that we all seem to agree that we share values, and we've all made that case very strongly. We all agree that to challenge the notion of what would be normal and what would be a new normal. I made that point at the very beginning that what was considered normal was perhaps undesirable because it was inequitable, ecologically unsustainable, with a business model that was not viable. Then we all seem to agree that mobility is certainly not the aim of internationalization in itself. It's part of a whole process. And we all agree that internationalization is actually an intentional process that needs to be purposeful. And that is where we can connect our realities. So it needs to be a deliberate strategy for improved quality and relevance of higher education. And that is what it is all about. It needs to be based on academic rationales, equitable and collaborative perspectives, and address inequalities. All points made by Adele and Orla as well. So I picked up on issues that you, Adele, did mention very forcefully, and you, Orla, as well, in your respective networks and in the kind of work that we do together. You know that the IAU carries out these global surveys on internationalization of higher education. It's funny, we finished the 5th one just at the end of 2019. We have to do it again because it's now today outdated. It's we are in a situation that calls for attention to what will be the future. There was one question that I will ping pong back to all of you, and that was this question about the geopolitical prioritization. I think that is very fascinating because what will it be in the future? Will things change? Will we move in other directions, either virtually or in face-to-face? And will we have the opportunity to prioritize knowledge above mobility, knowledge above economic rationales, knowledge about competing perspectives on where we want to go? And then just one point to the point made by you, Orla, the Addis Convention, wonderful, very good step into the future. There is another one that we worked on for 2 years with UNESCO. IAU was heavily involved, and that is the Global Convention on the Recognition of Higher Education Qualifications. And that one will be the future, because if all governments would ratify that one, it would allow to have an equal perspective on the value of the education systems in every part of the world. You know that we have worked with the IAU for 70 years of international cooperation. We've developed the International Handbook of Universities, and based on that, the World Higher Education Database. And in that database, we try to give equal space to all the systems to present themselves fully and to give full visibility to accredited institutions. We list 20,000 around the world, and that is another opportunity for a better connection on equal footing of our beautiful education systems in its full diversity. Thank you.
Adele, please, your reactions.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. And actually, thank you for this very, very good summary also. Yeah, I think you summarized very well the interventions and also the common probably values or aspiration of all of us. I would like personally to insist again on the institutional objectives of internationalization, or behind internationalization and beyond the numbers. Oftentimes I'm shocked when I see an institutional strategy with a list of objectives expressed in numbers and percentage. Increase the number of international students, increase the number of study abroad opportunities. And the why question is not really well framed and well formulated. But also, I would like maybe to see more institutional capacity building thanks to internationalization, especially when we talk about institutions in the South. Honestly, I don't like this division South and North and South, but I think this is a kind of terminology we use. So what the institutions they want to strengthen as an institution, what they want to keep, and how they want to evolve, what they want to serve their society. I remember I worked in a university here in Canada, actually. They told me our objective as an institution to be one of the first universities in quantum physics. And it was clear for them, if they want to excel in this area, they need to hire excellent faculty members, excellent researchers. And if they want to hire this faculty member in quantum physics, they want to have money. For money, they need projects, etc. So it was very clear. And I would love to see actually institutions, when they develop their internationalization strategy, to express also the objectives, the institutional objectives, what institutional capacities they want to develop. I think this is very important, not only students and research, etc. The geopolitical question will be very important indeed for all of us. And this is actually when we can see the shift of internationalization going sometime from not only north to south, but from west to east. And this is, I think, a shift we need to observe very closely and to work with our partners from all around the world. I will stop there.
Thank you, Adele. Please, Orla, your reactions.
Your mic?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Oops. You can hear me. Okay. I really liked Heliga's summary. And I think, you know, we obviously have quite a lot of similar values in the panel here today. People that really value internationalization as something to enhance a bigger project, a bigger agenda, a better way of being. It's not an end in itself. I think one of the things I feel this period is allowing us to is really improve a self-awareness in our sector, or a self-awareness in international education. And in our institutions. I mean, the institutions that were using internationalization, doing study short programs, you know, using it to make some income, they've really come quite a cropper during this period. And equally with those who rely on recruiting international students. So I think it really has been a sobering time. It's really going to make people assess, and a little bit going into your framework of the past, the present, and the future. I think it's going to help us see much more clearly where we currently stand. What is genuine internationalization for a enhancement of the teaching and learning, the academic project and community engagement, or, you know, whatever you term that in different countries, and what is actually another peripheral activity. I think it has shown us how interconnected, internationally reliant we all are. I mean, someone sneezed in one country and the rest of the world, you know, had to stop. It's like, it's not a myth that we're interconnected. We really felt it in a very real way during this period. And I think that hopefully through that reflection, we have all adapted. I mean, I have been working with a paperless office. I am a hoarder. I'm a paper person, and I've really wanted to stop it. But I've actually got caught in a situation where I'm not back at my home base. I got caught in travel with lockdown in another location. I don't have access to my usual facilities, but I have completely changed my way of working because I was forced to. You know, so paperless office, the fact that, you know, you use digital platforms, there's lots of really good stuff in here for, I think, you know, saving costs and promoting ideas. There is also the challenges of people don't have access to technology, that, you know, that's going to be a more challenging thing, because of course that comes back to resourcing and funding. But finally, to look forward, I absolutely agree with Adele's thing that we do need to know our theory of change. We need to know our why we do internationalization. and we need to develop models, and there is definitely scope for more work in that area that I think would help guide and steer international education going forward and internationalization going forward. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, you all. We have some questions from the public. The first one is to Adele. New models, urgent transition. It's an easy question. How long this transition must last?
Thank you, Renee. I answered already this question by written. I was writing my answer. I think the transition must be gradual. We cannot really afford to spend years now planning. So it will probably have a staggered approach, gradual approach, depending on the context and depending on the needs. If we don't ask ourselves what we want to achieve, what we want to change, we can spend years just waiting for airports to reopen. The problem is not in the reopening of the airport. The problem is what we want to change. I said also we must not be resilient. Again, this is another word I hate, because resilient means you come back to the original status of what you do, or you cope with it and you restart again with the same approach. I like this idea of anti-fragility. I don't know if you know Nassim Taleb. So fragile, you broke, resistant, you remain the same. And anti-fragile, it means you renew yourself. You learn and you recreate yourself in the new conditions. So this is how I frame this transformation or transition. New models, gradual approach.
Okay, thank you. We have another question for everyone. Many universities in Europe will start the next semester, next September, in a hybrid teaching model, partially face-to-face, partially distance learning. How do you see student mobility at this point? Is it academically valid to initiate student mobility by distance learning? Or can you?
Okay. I mean, I think again, some of this is going to be, it's going to be quite country based, isn't it? How and when we can actually really look at restarting student mobility properly. I mean, I certainly am very much a fan of collaborative online international learning as an alternative where a lot of our students can't afford to go abroad. So we try to, you know, one of the reasons I got very involved in internationalization at home was to actually bring international experience and use the international students on campus. Look, I think for some places where there is very close, I mean, there's a lot of proximity in Europe to, you know, countries very close to each other. And I think that as time goes on, it may be feasible because, you know, it's not going to be huge risk moving between them if there is more kind of a common sense of Europe kind of being into some common practices around protection against a second surge of COVID. I mean, personally, we won't be encouraging students to go from South Africa to anywhere for the rest of this year because we'll be waiting to see what happens. Will there be a second wave of COVID? It's just too risky. It's too expensive if people get stuck in a situation that they can't really afford. So we'll be taking a conservative, I think, wait and see approach. I don't know if that answers the question. I think we're all doing a little bit of crystal ball gazing, and some of this is going to be determined by the public health situation and by the situation, you know, government policies and so on. I would say, you know, it's a different experience to physically travel. It is definitely a different experience to physically go to another country and become a student to what you can do on campus and what you can do online. But I don't think it's within our control to determine when that's going to be reinstated.
Okay, I have another question. You want to add, please, Helen. Microphone, please.
Thank you for giving me the floor on that one. Since the IAU is based in Paris at UNESCO, so we're in the heart of the city, we are surrounded by many students who are questioning the future. There are two groups. There are those who are being questioned here. Is it valid and academically valid to initiate student mobility by distance learning? That is one question. But what about all those students who engaged in an international trajectory, had to return home in the crisis moment, and will not be able to return? How will they continue their academic career? That will be very interesting to address as well. There is maybe too little attention to that internationally. We will have at the IAU a webinar on the future of internationalization at the end of the month on the 30th, together with Boston College and colleagues from around the world. And maybe that in 2 weeks' time, we will again, and certainly still be a bit crystal ball gazing, as you said, Orla, but maybe we have a little bit more certainty. As you said, you just had more information today as to the opportunity to have face-to-face meetings. Every day the situation changes. We now hear that in China, there's a second wave of COVID that is coming up. And so we don't know how that will translate. Is it the same COVID-19 or is it the different one? We also don't know. So it is true that one certainty we have is that we have no certainty on the future, but that we have these different groups in this internationalization when accompanied by mobility that are impacted in different ways. All those who have planned to leave their university for a year, have applied elsewhere, cannot travel. What will happen to them? So there are many strategies that are being developed at home institutions to offer the opportunity for them to stay where they started their studies. And those who have no place to go because they were studying abroad came back home because the home is still the parental home somehow. But what will they do, and how will universities be able to provide for the quality education that they need? And there again, you have many different approaches to many different disciplines. You have certain disciplines that lend themselves better to online teaching, others that are maybe more practical, that also come with very concrete challenges. If you take, for instance, in the arts, and if you have undertaken a school of ballet somewhere internationally, you're back home. How will you pursue your studies in the future? If you have undertaken a school of arts and design, for instance, and you need practice in labs or whatever, at home, the situation is totally different. If you were in the phase as a lawyer and you need to go into practice, or a veterinarian student, or in medical studies. So all of these different dimensions will have a long-lasting impact on the career of the students. Similarly, what is very interesting in this whole situation is that you all have in your different contexts and associations also the very difficult issue that schools has had to face in terms of validating the school years in order for the students then to be able to apply to a university, either at the national level. But if during the year they have applied elsewhere, they have not applied to attend a university in their own country, there's no space for them. So it's the whole situation of adapting to the new reality, where probably the spaces that will not be taken up by the international students will be freed up for local students, but that whole dynamic will take the whole summer to address, because it's a total revision of plans. And it is true that today internationalization is part and parcel of the vision of what we want to do with education. And I fully agree with you, Adele, that we need for whole of institution approaches to internationalization. But it's also a whole system approach to internationalization, where in a situation of crisis as we face it today, we also have all these other aspects that actually come right from even before even entering the system, or while in a career path. Then what do you do with that? I would love to hear from you how these aspects are also maybe handled at Rhodes University or at the University of Ottawa, because these movements have been scheduled and they are not going to take place for the many. Even though now it looks like some countries in Europe will open, they will open maybe for mobility inside the European area, and probably not beyond either, because of this uncertainty of the situation in the health or economic situations at large. So sorry for a long-winded response, but I think this is a very important point, because there is this category of students that may fall between the cracks.
Adele, you can.
Yeah, just maybe very quickly, and I cannot really, answer your question now, but I think it's important again to seize this opportunity actually, and not only think in terms of student mobility, but also in terms of cooperation among institutions. For example, there are several categories of students. Oftentimes, when we talk about student study abroad, we think about the short term, and although no, you have full degree people there, they spend years and years abroad, and it's not only a personal project. Sometimes it's a family and even corporate project. So there's a lot of challenges here, and I think we need to recognize that the whole society is challenged, not only higher education. So coming from a country, my home country, Lebanon, I lived in the war situation, and I know that sometimes you miss, years, academic years, you lose them, and actually several countries, they passed by this kind of situation. We are not there yet, but fortunately or unfortunately, the current crisis is a global one. So we have similar situation all around the world, sometimes strange how similar they are, but we have similar situations all around the world. I see, maybe I'm dreaming here, but I see an opportunity, for example, for a bachelor students who, for example, studying in Canada, and now who is back on temporary base to Brazil, maybe to continue his study in a Brazilian university, working jointly with a Canadian university. So all this idea of joint programs and collaboration among institutions, it is time now for us to operationalize them, because this is how we build not only individual capacities, but also institutional capacities. An example for that, for example, engineering students. Engineering students, they need to access labs. They need to access, research facilities. There's a lot of very interesting research facilities in the South or in other countries. If we connect them in virtual lab approach, if we connect them in mode of open resource, sharing, we can probably work together, and the student will have double degree probably. I may be dreaming, but I'm working with a university in India to see how our engineering students can access their lab and our courses. So we need to be, I think, to innovate. We need to think out of the box, and I think institutions in the system need to accommodate us, because it's not normal. And we, again, discussing what is normal, but we are given an exceptional situation.
Thank you all. I would like to invite our president, Maria Leonor Maia, to her final comments. Please, Nona.
So many things to think about. I was just thinking about Professor Novoa, who was the former president of University of Lisboa, in a live last week that he brought us with a good provocation. He said that the pandemic has not changed anything in the university space. The problems have been there for a long time. The pandemic has rekindled the issues and calls for a quick response. And this strikes me a lot, because I think that this might be a possibility. It's not the new normal, but it's the old model. If we could make some connections with what was said by Adele, we can return to the old model and just, you know, and then I was thinking about the new model. What is the role universities has to play as an agent of change? Universities are agents of changes. And I think that all of you, you know, Adele, Hillich, and Ola, all of you brought an excellent agenda for discussing. And you answer in some way my letter. Thank you very much for answering, for bringing me some ideas about how can we dialogue from now on. And I think that one of the things that you've shown us is that besides sharing some values about communities, about a better society, and about the role of internationalization and the process of education and the approaching to education, is that there is no recipe for this, that we have to look at our needs, that we have to look to the geopolitics as well. And we have to take the opportunity that the COVID is bringing to us, as many others, to draw this new model, as Adele bring this idea to us. And thank you very much for shed some lights to this dialogue. And we hope that we can keep send you letters, you know, and keeping this dialogue in this new format and maybe in this new model. Thank you very much. I would take the chance also to thank you, Rene, for being our moderator in these webinars, and also José Celso, our organizer and the CEO of UNESP, and also the UNESP as a provider of the platform, which allows us to keep in contact with all of you. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the attendees. Rene, it's up to you.
We would like thanking you all, the speakers, the participants. We would like to invite you all to join us next Wednesday for another virtual Wednesday, June 24th at 12 Brazilian time, not 3 p.m., 12 p.m. This time, for a new FAUBAI webinar. We will be joining the FAUBAI webinar program. We'll be joining the second meeting of Networks for Internationalization in Latin America, an opportunity for cooperation with representatives from international education networks and associations from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. We'll have two presidents of universities, Professor João Carlos Salles, president of Universidade Federal da Bahia, and current president of the Brazilian Association for Federal Higher Education Institutions in Brazil, and Dr. Juan Elogio Guerra Vieira from Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa. And the webinar will be run in Spanish and Portuguese this time. Thank you all again for attending this webinar, and please take a moment to let us know how we did by answering the evaluation form at the end of this event. Please do it. It's very important for us. Thank you again. See you all. We will be expecting for you to be with us next Wednesday. Have a nice and safe week. Thank you. Merci. Gracias. Muito obrigada. Bye.
Thank you.
Obrigada. Thank you. It was nice to be together. And thank you.